listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast about business, marketing, growth, strategy, staff, clients, babies, marriage. I am Christina. This is Peter, and we are founders and leaders of CIPR Communications. We're in our series on public relations, which is something I love. And today we're going to talk about media training.
Yeah, media training. This is actually really mostly your department. So probably you're going to...
Well, it's really Brad's department.
Well, it's Brad's department, but I don't do a lot of the media training at CIPR, but you and Brad do. But anyways, yeah, we kind of actually sort of just going back to last episode a little bit and talking about managing PR expectations. At the very end of the episode, we talked about having your house in order. And this is one of those house in order type things. In the sense that, like, when somebody puts a microphone in front of you, you're sort of in a bit of a different realm, a bit of a different world. And if you haven't been through that before, it could be quite overwhelming and quite sort of, I don't know the word, but sort of could be a little scary, and it could sort of get you a little off guard. And so, yeah, it's pretty important. So Christina, what do you have to say about media training?
What I'll say is, like, I am definitely not a person that likes to practice something. Like, you know this about me. Like, I would much rather go onto a stage and wing it than to, like, sit and practice, which is, I feel like, an interesting story for everyone about us, because we do a lot of presenting together and a lot of teaching together. And, kind of a side note into marriage, because we don't talk a lot about that on this show, and we should.
I think we'll do a whole episode, a whole series on just marriage. It could be fun.
But like, we prepare very differently for things. And I would say the most stressful thing about you and I speaking together is the preparation.
True.
And not even the, like, building the deck or what are we going to talk about, but like the practice and who's doing what and who's whatever. Because we're different personalities and we're different styles. And so when someone says to me, oh, you need to do media training, my gut reaction is always, I don't need to practice. I'll be fine. I can get up there and do it. And so I'm speaking to all of you people, you need to practice.
Yeah. Well, it's not only that. What I would say about media training, and we've discovered this many, many, many times by doing media training sessions, is that oftentimes the person that the company least expects is actually amazingly good at media and key messaging and sticking to scripts. And so, like, then that only happens when you have a media training session and have 8-10 people in the room all practicing and all whatever. Just because somebody's a CEO doesn't mean they're the best media spokesperson, and in fact often they're not. And so just as a bit of a side note ish, but like, really when you go through a corporate media training sort of exercise, it's amazing what you can discover about who's good at it, who's not good at it, who's comfortable, who's not comfortable, who might be good at certain topics and who might not be good at others. So there's a lot of learning that can come out of just the session alone for your company that is positive, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one huge perspective, and you get to kind of see who comes across as what on camera, start to understand personalities. I think, in past lives and past careers, when we did media training, there were definitely certain subjects that a media trainer, and presumably my boss at the time, said, like, she can't speak to that.
Yeah.
She sounds way too defensive. And, fair enough. Hey, there's probably someone better who is a little bit less whatever than me that can handle that. But they identified, like, there are a bunch of these topics that she should be speaking to, and it's a great, different face for the organization. And, no, I wasn't, on a leadership team or this or that, but I was a good subject matter expert on a few things, and media training helped them suss that out. I'd say the other piece of media training that will help your team kind of have some awareness around is key messaging.
Yes.
And so I think a lot of, especially leaders or subject matter experts that are so close to something, know, oh yeah, I know how to talk about that. I talk about marketing and communications 50 times a day. I know exactly what to say. But, like, what's the company line?
Right.
What is the what is the what are the messages that are most important for your company to get out? And I think during most media training sessions that we have, if a client doesn't start with key messages, so something else that we offer, we will come in and help your organization develop their key messages. I think to organizations like Heritage Calgary or Métis Crossing or Tourism Kamloops, where it's like they all have binders of key messages now. So if somebody calls, it's like, lick the finger, turn to the page, or, click the folder in your Dropbox binder, and you have those key messages now that have been created. So sometimes you walk into media training with the key messages already done, which gives you an excellent opportunity to review those key messages as a team and make sure everyone's on the same page. Or it allows you to see, if you're not coming in with key messages, how differently people are talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And, when Brad and I go in, we typically, have a list of questions beforehand. Those that have key messages, there's always, one or two that haven't done the homework and go off script. But when you have a key message and you're watching back 3, 5, 8 interviews from different staff and they're all saying the same thing, wow. And then if you're doing the same thing, it's 3 to 8 people and they're all saying different things, this should be like the huge, I don't want to say red flag, but flag.
Yeah.
For that leader in the company or for the person who's, put the training together, that like, you need to take a step back and decide how you're talking about certain things. Are you using these acronyms? Are you not? Are you mentioning that thing? Are you allowed to talk about this? What are you allowed to say? Media training often really allows you to see where your house is in order from a messaging perspective.
From an internal perspective and an understanding perspective. Yeah. And what I'll say too about media training, I mean, like, we're sort of talking a little bit at the broader level right now, but like there's also some very hard technical things you get out of media training skills, right? And so like there's just hard and fast skills when it comes to speaking in media, things like blocking and bridging and holding statements and giving the list in terms of a good media clip, speaking for a certain length of time so that you get a clip that's clean and you're not just rambling on. And like there's a lot of actually very technical things that go into like, giving a great media interview, sitting up properly, smiling when you're on the phone. Like there's all kinds of really technical things that I think it's important, even if you've talked to the media a lot of times, it's good to have reminders, right? We forget, right? We get complacent, we get kind of lazy and we forget things. And what's your background image look like? What colors are you wearing? What kind of jewelry are you wearing? There's a lot of things that to be mindful of, to be really successful at media.
It's true. I'm going to call out Josh Trapchow. He's the executive director at Calgary, Heritage Calgary. And he has been doing media forever and a day and is great at it. If you ever want to Google Josh, do it. He's some great interviews. He sat through media training with us. I think it was the beginning of this past year, a couple months back. And I was so excited that he learned something from it, because I thought really going in, okay, Josh has a ton of experience. We've worked in politics together. I know him on camera and I feel fine about it. And he sent a little picture to me on WhatsApp in his next interview. And the interesting transition, I think, for Josh and many people who have been media commentators for years and years is this switch to the Skype or the Zoom or the online interview. And the things that make you look polished and amazing in studio do not do the same things, right? Like you're having a conversation with someone in studio, you're across from them. The media training from a technical perspective is you're not looking at a camera, you're like looking at the person beside you and you're talking and there's something very intimate. Whereas on Skype, like this is it. Like you are looking, media interview. You're looking at a camera. What do you do? And so Josh sent us this picture, and it was something that we had suggested in media training, where he had taped to his computer screen his notes, so his key messages. And so they're right in front of him. He has a screen off, which is also a tip that I give in CIPR's media training. He had all his notes on screen. So his eyes, he is looking at the camera. He's
Yeah.
great. There's no opportunity for him to look down.
Yeah.
And written in kind of big, bold letters, he has those, trigger words.
High level key messages and trigger words. Yeah.
Yeah, that are going to help him deliver that interview. So, to your point, I think that even the seasoned media guy or gal who thinks, I don't need practice, I'm pointing to myself, media has changed.
Yeah.
And so we've talked through this whole series about the media environment has changed, but like the media has changed in the way they're interviewing people or delivering messages and it's always been quick, but now with COVID, you have this like electronic way of doing interviews now, and that is not going away.
That's going to be the norm, 100%. Like with
100%,
media having smaller and smaller budgets, they're not going to be running around the cities doing whatever, right? This works, right? So
it's true.
Yeah.
You don't have to have people in studio.
Yeah.
You're not rushing to kind of move scenes and do like that is the way it's going. So if you don't feel comfortable, or if no one on your team has ever given an interview via Zoom or via Skype, like practice.
Yeah. So I mean, certainly we encourage really anybody that has any kind of thought about doing PR and having more of a media presence, like really you should have media training as part of what you're doing. And that goes down to really, looking at your PR from a long-term investment perspective. And, media training, if you have a PR agency working with you, media training likely is one of the things that could be sort of embedded into your program as part of what you do. And you might do it often, right? You might do it with some frequency. You might do it when there's a new staff person coming in. Like there's all kinds of times and reasons to do media training. And I'll even go as far as like, maybe there's even value if you're, a bigger company that's doing a lot of media, like every time you have a new senior person coming in, having your PR agency, like basically put that person through media training just as part of their onboarding, so that they can learn the corporate messaging, so that they can learn all of the key messages and the points and expectations when it comes to sort of how we're presenting ourselves in the media, right?
Yeah, I think the best like rule of thumb, I love that. Like if a new person that is going to be public facing for sure, but also anytime your key messages change. So if you've launched a new campaign or a new initiative that has its own set of key messages, just do some practice. Or if there's something like that has changed in your business, or you've pivoted to something else, or your industry is under fire for something, anytime your key messages are changing, evolving, think about, do we need to practice this? So I mean, the interesting about media training too, because I feel like people are like, well, what is it? How we tackle it, and I feel like it's a little bit different than your average agency. I think that traditionally media training is that professional coming in, playing the role of reporter, quizzing you, then giving you, tips on your technique. What we start with, the first session is really learning. So to your point, like what are all the technical things you need to know about going on camera, about doing radio, about doing a podcast, about those things? How does the media contact you? How do you respond? When should you be practicing? What is bridging and blocking, and how do you use that in your technique? So we really take a big piece and chunk of your time to remind you or to teach you for the first time, like what media relations is and what media is. And I think there's these really eye-opening moments during those sessions always where people go, oh, like there are 10 steps to do before I get my media interview, or, oh, there's 12 things that happen before my press release is even put across a wire. I think those conversations, especially when you can have your senior team at the table, the ones who are probably telling you, the marketing or comms manager, to like do the press release, creates some interesting buy-in and really creates awareness in terms of how the media works. And then that second half is about practice, right? So it is about, these days we do them all online, right? So, you'd log into your Zoom chat and Brad plays the role of reporter and you get right into it. You practice what you just learned, you practice those key messages. And that second part can happen anytime, over and over again, right? Like,
And it actually should be something you even do on your own too, like prior to doing a media interview, and right, like that should be an ongoing exercise always, because especially if you're a senior leader in a company, I mean, the next episode is again another great transition, but like all the different components of PR, who are stakeholders, it's like, you're public speaking to stakeholders all the time, and so you should be practicing that and practicing your messaging. And the other thing I'll say too is that, like, you write key messages, but everybody has a different speaking style and a different whatever. So like, no two people are going to say those key messages exactly the same. And so what is your way of saying those key messages? And then do you need to then vet that with your leadership team to make sure that it actually is saying the same thing in your own words, right? So that it comes out naturally, right? So that's where that practice comes in. Like, what comes out naturally for me, just because some PR person wrote, this is my key message, like, we don't all talk the same. And so you need to sort of personalize all of that, right?
It's true. Like, there's that, authenticity to you and building your own personal brand and that piece. And I think it's so important. The last step that we would do, if we're media training an organization, is we then package it all up, right? So you have all the information you got from learning about media as a team. You have your cheat sheets that we give you, so something you can hang on your bulletin board to remind you of all those technical things. But then we give everybody their videos, right? We're recording you doing your interview. And those are those moments that you talked about at the beginning of this podcast. Now the boss is probably watching them, or you are. And it's like, oh, that person was way better than anyone thought, or that person really knows how to talk about this technical thing in our business in a really approachable way. Let's use that in key messages, or let's use that person to discuss it if it ever comes up with media. So there's this interesting piece. What I'll say about media training too is it's actually an interesting like team building activity. It's something that, one, you're reiterating your corporate values, your key messages, your whatever. You're giving your team a really practical way to practice those things and talk about them. But it's fun. Like,
it is fun.
It's fun to
find out your colleagues a little bit if they're nervous or whatever.
Yeah, you get to kind of really see inside of what makes people tick. And we always share back interviews at the end of sessions, a little bit of the blooper reel, depending on the company culture and the personalities at play. But it's a fun team building thing. I think everyone walks out feeling a little bit closer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So there you go, media training. If you're going to go down the PR route, you better be going down the media training route as well, as part of what you're doing, so that you're fully prepared and your house is fully in order.
It's true. If you're like me and you think you don't need to practice,
you're wrong.
You need a Peter Pilarski to tell you that you do. Thanks, guys. You know where to find us. CIPR Comms, and follow Two Babies in a Business on Spotify and iTunes for the next episode.
Later.